Am I the asshole for telling my mom her dream for my wedding stopped being possible the day my dad died? My dad died when I was 7 years old. He was my favorite person, my mom's favorite person, at the time. And I kind of think he was the person who could complement our personalities enough for us to be super close. Even as a little kid I kind of knew that. It broke the two of us when he died. But then she found someone else, she found Luke. She married Luke when I was 9 and he became her person. Luke, upon realizing my dad had been the parent I was closest to, tried to fill that space, and was unwilling to listen when I said that space was reserved for my dad. It caused some tension. Over time I let some things go. They would call themselves my parents or my mom and dad. I always called him Luke. I always told people close to me about my dad and would make sure it was known Luke was not Dad. Our relationship now that I am several years out of their house is amicable but not close. I don't hate them, but my mom and I still don't mesh well, and Luke still wants to fill that role my dad had and I still don't want him to. Ever since I got engaged my mom has been more present. She has told me how she always dreamed of this day, etc. Over time she brought up how she and Luke couldn't wait to see him walk me down the aisle and give me my father-daughter dance and how they were excited to be mom and dad of the bride. I told her none of that was happening. She told me it was always her dream though. That from the time she found out she was expecting a girl she couldn't wait to watch me on my dad's arm and in his arms for a dance. I told her that was possible when Dad was alive, but not when he was gone. She told me it was still possible. There was still my dad, Luke, and that he deserved it, they both did. I told her I was walking with my fiancé and no father-daughter dance would happen. I told her he was not going to be listed as father of the bride anywhere, because he is not my father. I ended up telling her to leave and I went back to less contact. Then my mom showed up unannounced and started to tell me all about this dream again and what it meant to her, and I told her clearly, without hesitation, that her dream stopped being possible when my dad died because he was not here to do that stuff and that Luke was never going to be filling my dad's role for me. I told her she might be able to switch them out easily, but I was not. She left in tears, telling me I had punished her for moving on and punished my dad for not being Cal, my dad. That she and my dad deserved better than that, and I was spiteful. Am I the asshole? Edited to add more additional details. Luke. He cut up cards I had made, given my dad for Father's Day, that my dad had kept safe before he died, and cut up the back and left the front and then turned them into a collage and acted like they were cards I had given him. When my mom and him brought out my birth certificate for something, he told me he couldn't wait to see his name on it instead of the old husband. He told me my dad had done nothing special and that he could do what my dad had done for me and my mom, but better. Mom. My mom just erased my dad from and added Luke to. Then expected me to do the same. She even went as far as taking photo frames that had stuff like, our family, or, dad and daughter, and replacing them with photos that included Luke instead of my dad. She also told me more than once that Luke was our new favorite person. Or would say, Dad's our favorite person like always, and it was always in reference to Luke. Not the asshole. You don't consider Luke as your father. Period. Your mom and Luke should accept it once and for all, and your mom should also cease her emotional blackmailing. ETA. Many thanks for the award. Not the asshole. You said it as nicely as you could and she kept pressing the issue. You were not unnecessarily cruel about it, you were just firm. Her and Luke trying to force the issue of him being your new dad from the start was not a healthy approach and was never going to give them the results that they wanted. It's your wedding and they need to respect your boundaries. Not the asshole. Side note. Am I the only person who finds 2 years from the dating to engagement to marriage phases to be _fast? Especially when there's children involved. Am I the asshole for refusing to hand over my phone to my boss to check the message I sent? My F-26-3 son got sick and I had to take him to the hospital in the morning. I took an hour off work and texted my boss letting him know why. I arrived to work later and my boss requested to see me in his office. He started questioning me about being late, but I told him I already sent him a text telling him why. He said he didn't receive anything, but I assured him that I sent it. He told me to hand over my phone so he could check, but I refused. I asked him to check his phone, but he again denied receiving anything and said there was no point in checking his inbox. He asked that I hand over my phone to see the text I sent, but I still refused and suggested that I open the text and show it to him because I have private messages with my boyfriend that I fidn't anybody to see, let alone my boss. He refused to let me show him, saying I might be faking it, but I already have the time and date of the text. He got mad and insisted that I hand it over. I declined and said no, this is my privacy and he does not get to violate it just because he has authority over me. He got more upset and told me to step outside. After making me wait for 30+ minutes. He had his female assistant try to convince me to let him have a quick look, but I refused. The argument escalated and I was told to go home till this is figured out. My boss is angry with me and his assistant is claiming that it was such a weird hill to die on and that if I truly send him a message then I should just let him have a look. Am I the asshole? I mean, I offered him alternative way to see the text but he insisted on checking it himself. I'm an extremely private person and the thought of him peeking at private, vulnerable conversations with my boyfriend makes uncomfortable. My boyfriend thinks I should have just given it to him without making a scene. Not the asshole. Holy shit, what a serious invasion of privacy. Suggested that I open the text and show it to him. You suggested a very reasonable compromise that would give him all the information he needed from you and he refused. He just wanted to pry. This was creepy, inappropriate, and most probably illegal. I would report to HR depending on your area's privacy laws. Edit. Changed to information, so it wouldn't count as a judgment. Not the asshole. Regardless if your boss does or does not have good reason not to trust you, he needs to deal with it like a professional. You can't just invade someone's privacy. This wouldn't even be appropriate in an intimate relationship, never mind a boss-employee relationship. Am I the asshole for only inviting some of my sister's children to my wedding? I, F25. Got married to my husband, M25, in August. We kept it small and simple and didn't want too many guests due to budget, so we only invited close family members and friends. My older sister, Dawn, F38, has 10 children, M17, F16, M14, F10, F9, M7, M5, M3, M3 and M1. My parents and the rest of my family aren't religious, but Dawn and her husband are very hardcore Christians and believe that having lots of children is God's will. Obviously, inviting all of my nieces and nephews would be quite a cost. My wedding isn't child-free, but my husband and I decided it would be fairest if we only invited Dawn's 3 eldest kids. I talked to Dawn about it and explained our reasoning, but she was really offended and said that I'm picking favorites. I told her I'm sorry, but 10 kids is a big cost on our wedding budget and that we tried to be as fair as possible. Dawn accused me of being a bridezilla and thinking I'm too good for her and her family. I told Dawn if she doesn't like it she doesn't have to come, but that she's my sister and I really want her at the wedding. Dawn, her husband and 3 eldest did come to the wedding, but with other family members bringing small children, everyone was asking her about why not all of their kids were there. After the wedding, Dawn has been very off around me lately. She told me she understands how I feel about her babies and said that I'm a bad sister and a terrible aunt, and has accused me of not respecting her religion and lifestyle. My parents and other siblings have been making comments like, "Don't get too excited for XYZ. Op said only 3 people can come because there's too many of us." The comments have been getting to me a bit and I'm wondering if I was the ETA. My husband and I paid for the wedding ourselves. I didn't want to ask my parents or Dawn for help with paying for anything because neither of them have a lot of money. If Dawn offered to help cover costs so all of her kids could come I wouldn't have a problem. I might get downvoted but not the asshole. If your sister was so upset she could have offered to contribute towards the costs. A consequence of having a load of kids is that people aren't going to want to cater to all of them at events because it is a big cost. Edit. I agree this could have been planned better to prevent drama as others suggested a blanket rule, but I don't think Op is an asshole and I can see their logic behind it. Hindsight is 20/20. Not the asshole. Y'all, she literally said it wasn't in the budget for 10 kids plus 2 adults. That's a family of 12. And for all the YTA comments. How about y'all invite the family to your weddings? See how much that shit costs. Not the asshole. Start saying, I'd have loved to have had all my nieces and nephews at my wedding, but I just couldn't afford it. If someone had offered to pay for their plates, I'd have been delighted. Am I the asshole for refusing to stop using my nephew's nickname? Just getting ages out of the way. I'm 22, M. My nephew is 7 and my brother is 23. I have a special nickname for nephew. I call him Blip. I call him that because he was a tiny baby when he was born and when I first held him, My dad said, "He's barely a blip on your radar." That was a joke because I'm pretty tall and my nephew looked extra tiny when I was holding him. Since then, Blip became my nickname for him. I still call him that and he doesn't like it when anyone other than me calls him that. The issue happened earlier today. My siblings, they're technically my step-siblings, but I consider them siblings, and I were visiting my dad and stepmom. I got there at the same time as my brother. I walked in and said hello to everyone. I said, "Hey Blip," to my nephew. My brother walked in after me and said, "Hey Blip," to my nephew as well. My nephew didn't like that and politely asked my brother to not call him that. That started an argument between my brother and I that ended with him asking me to not call my nephew Blip anymore. I refused and my brother called me a pompous asshole. The family's pretty split on this. My dad and older sister, my nephew's mom, think I should be allowed to have a special nickname for my nephew, but my stepmom and younger stepsister think that if they can't call him Blip then I shouldn't be allowed to either. So am I the asshole for refusing to stop using my nephew's nickname? Editing to add. After the argument between my brother and I asked my nephew if he was still okay with me using his nickname. He said he still wanted to be called Blip by me. Also adding, "My brother's not my nephew's dad. He's just another uncle. Not the asshole. This should be entirely up to your nephew. He can choose what he likes to be called and who is allowed to call him what. Not the asshole. The only opinion that matters is your nephew's. Everything else is just noise. Not the asshole. My older brother has a nickname for me, and he is the only person in this entire galaxy allowed to call me that. My family respects it. This is not a complex issue. Your nephew has a boundary, and your family should respect that. Not the asshole. I have a nickname that only my dad uses. It's a special thing between us and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In ta. He's your Blip. FM. Not the asshole. Your nephew doesn't like it when anyone else calls him Blip. So, anyone else who calls him that without his permission is the A.H. I'm amazed that your brother who is 23 doesn't understand what is patently obvious to your 7-year-old nephew.